The wind off the Red River did not merely blow, it scoured. It carried the grit of 3 territories, a dry, abrasive dust that sought out the cracks in the chinking of the log cabin and settled in the lines of Clara's face. It was the winter of 1882, and the Texas Panhandle was a place where the earth seemed determined to shake off the people clinging to its back. Clara stood on the porch of the cabin she had built with her husband, a man now buried under a simple wooden cross on the rise behind the barn. She pulled her shawl tighter against the biting chill. She was 32 years old, though the sun and the wind had conspired to etch a few more years around her eyes. She was not a beauty in the way the silk-clad women in Dallas were, but she possessed a fierce, angular strikingness, like a cliff face weathered by storm. Her hands, resting on the rough railing, were calloused and stained with the lye soap she made and sold to the townsfolk. She scanned the horizon. To the east, the sky was the color of a bruised plum, promising snow or freezing rain. To the south lay the rutted track that led to town, a lifeline that felt more like a noose on days when the flour barrel scraped bottom. "Ma, the trap line is clear." The voice was high and clear, cutting through the low moan of the wind. Clara looked down to see Eli sprinting across the yard, his boots kicking up puffs of dry dirt. He was small for 8 years old, with a mop of hair as black as a raven's wing and skin that browned deeply in the summer sun. He held up 2 limp rabbits by their hind legs, his face flushed with the triumph of a provider. "Good eye, Eli," Clara said, forcing a warmth into her voice that chased away the chill of the morning. "That is a stew for tonight and pelts for the trader come Saturday." Eli beamed, the gap in his front teeth showing. He ran to the skinning table near the barn, moving with a grace that always struck Clara as unusual. Most boys his age stumbled over their own feet, growing too fast for their bones. But Eli moved like water over stone. Clara watched him, and as always, the familiar ache settled in her chest. He was her son in every way that mattered, every way except blood. She remembered the night she found him, 4 years ago. It had been near the charred remains of a wagon train that had taken a wrong turn near the river crossing. The air had smelled of acrid smoke and death. She had been scavenging for scrap metal, a grim necessity of her widowhood, when she heard a whimper from beneath a scorched, heavy canvas tarp. He had been 4 years old then, curled into a ball, his eyes wide and vacant. He remembered nothing of his name, his people, or the violence that had orphaned him. He remembered only the smell of burning and the thunder of many horses. She had named him Eli, after her grandfather. She had taken him in, bathed the soot from his skin, and fed him broth until his stomach could handle meat. And in saving him, she had anchored herself to the earth when her grief had threatened to blow her away like a tumbleweed. "Ma, are you coming?" Eli called out, already brandishing the skinning knife. "I am coming," Clara replied. She stepped off the porch, her boots crunching on the frost-hardened ground. The ride into town 2 days later was a battle against the elements. The wagon, old and rattling, complained with every rotation of its wheels. Clara held the reins, her gloves thick but unable to keep the cold from seeping into her knuckles. Eli sat beside her, wrapped in a buffalo robe, his dark eyes scanning the brush with an intensity that unsettled her. "Do you see something?" she asked, keeping her voice light. "Just a hawk," Eli said, pointing to a circling shape against the gray sky. "He is hunting. Everyone is hunting this time of year," Clara murmured. The town was a collection of clapboard buildings huddled together against the vastness of the plains. It existed solely because of the stagecoach line and the promise of the railroad, which the newspapers said was crawling closer every day, an iron snake eating its way west. Clara tied the horse to the hitching rail outside the general store. The boardwalks were busy despite the cold. Men in heavy coats tipped their hats, their eyes lingering on her a moment too long. A widow was a tragedy, but a widow who refused to remarry and managed her own land was a curiosity. A widow raising a boy who looked like Eli was a scandal. Inside the store, the air was thick with the smell of coffee, tobacco, and sawdust. Mr. Abernathy stood behind the counter, polishing a jar of peppermint sticks. "Afternoon, Widow Miller," he said, his tone polite but guarded, cold enough to freeze the tail off a brass monkey. Afternoon. Mr. Abernathy, Clara said, placing her basket of washed and pressed shirts on the counter. I brought the laundry for the boarding house. And the rabbit pelts. Abernathy inspected the shirts with critical eyes. Clean work, as always, and the pelts look prime. I can give you $2.40 for the lot. Flour is up to $6 a barrel, Clara countered softly. And I need 50 rounds of ammunition. Winchester center fire? Abernathy sighed, scratching his bearded chin. Prices are up everywhere. Clara, the freight wagons are having trouble with the mud down south, but for you, I will tally it against the store credit. While they bartered, Clara felt the eyes of the other customers. 2 women by the fabric bolts were whispering, their bonnets leaning together like conspirators. Look at the boy, one whispered. Not quiet enough. Dark as a nut, and the way he walks. Silent as a cat. I heard she found him in a ditch, the other replied. God knows what blood is in him. It is not Christian, raising a stray with no history. Clara stiffened. She felt Eli shift beside her. He had heard them. He always heard them. He did not understand the full weight of their prejudice, but he understood the tone. It was the same tone people used when they looked at a wolf pup they had decided to chain in the yard wary, waiting for it to bite. Clara turned, her gaze sharp enough to cut glass. The women suddenly found the gingham fabric fascinating. Come, Eli, Clara said, her voice firm. We have what we need. She took the sack of flour and the heavy box of ammunition. As they walked out, she placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. It was a claim. He is mine. Let the town talk. But the town was not the only thing watching them. On the ride back, the feeling crawled up Clara's spine, primal and urgent. It was the sensation of being observed, a prickling at the back of her neck. She kept the rifle across her lap, her eyes darting to the ridgeline. Ma, Eli asked, sensing her tension. Hush now, she said. Just keep your eyes on the road. When they reached the cabin, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the world in blood and shadow. Clara unhitched the horse and led him into the barn. That was when she saw it. On the wooden post of the corral fence, snagged on a rough splinter, was a long strand of horsehair. Clara stopped, her breath catching in her throat. She reached out and plucked it free. It was coarse and deep red, the color of rust. She owned a bay mare and a mule. Neither of them had hair this color. She looked down at the ground. The earth was frozen hard, resisting footprints. But near the woodpile, the snow was disturbed. Not by wind, by a boot, a moccasin, perhaps, or a worn boot with a soft sole. The depression was faint, almost invisible. But Clara knew every inch of her yard. Someone had stood there. Someone had stood there and watched the house while she was gone. She crumpled the red hair in her fist, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked toward the tree line, where the shadows were deepening into black pools. There was nothing there now, just the wind and the silence. Eli, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Go inside. Bar the door. What is it? Ma, do as I say. Now. The boy obeyed, running to the cabin. Clara stayed in the yard for another minute, the rifle heavy in her hand. She was alone. She had been alone for 4 years, and she had learned that safety was an illusion. It was something you built every day with locked doors and loaded guns. She went inside and dropped the heavy wooden bar into place across the door. The cabin was warm, the fire still banking in the hearth. It was a single room, divided by a curtain for privacy. A sturdy table, 2 chairs, a shelf of well-worn books, and the smell of dried sage and wood smoke. It was not much, but it was theirs. That evening, the routine was their sanctuary. Clara cooked the rabbit stew, the rich aroma filling the small space. Eli sat by the fire, whittling a piece of cedar. He was shaping it into a horse. He was always carving horses. Read to me, Ma, he asked after they had eaten. Clara fetched the Bible and the tattered copy of Robinson Crusoe from the shelf. She sat in the rocking chair, and Eli sat on the rag rug at her feet. leaning his head against her knee. She read aloud, her voice rhythmic and soothing. She read about shipwrecks and islands, about survival against the odds. As she read, her hand absently stroked Eli's hair. It was thick and coarse. He shifted, and his sleeve rode up. In the firelight, the thin white scar on his wrist stood out. It circled his wrist like a bracelet, a mark that looked painfully like the burn of a rope. It was the only mark on him when she found him, other than the soot. Clara stopped reading. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small object she always carried. It was a piece of silver, hammered flat and cut into the shape of a bird, a hawk or an eagle. But it was only half a bird. The metal had been jaggedly broken down the middle. She had found it clenched in Eli's fist the night she pulled him from the wreckage. She looked at the boy, then at the silver fragment, then at the barred door. "Ma!" Eli looked up, his eyes heavy with sleep. "Why did you stop?" "I lost my place." Clara lied. "That is enough for tonight. To bed with you." Eli climbed into his loft bed. Clara stayed by the fire. She cleaned her rifle. The smell of gun oil sharp in the air. She counted the cartridges. 40 in the box, 6 in the chamber. She thought about the red horsehair. She thought about the whispers in town. He could be the son of anyone. The women had said Clara knew better. He was not just anyone's son. He was a boy who remembered the smell of smoke and feared the sound of shouting men. He was a boy who moved silently and carved horses. She had sworn, standing over her husband's grave, that she would never let another man break her heart. She had sworn she would rely on no one but herself. Freedom cost too much, and she had paid for hers in sweat and loneliness. But as the wind howled outside, battering the walls of the cabin, Clara felt that old, familiar ache. It was a hollow space in her center, a treacherous wish that she tried to strangle every night, a wish that there was someone else on the other side of the door. Not a threat, but a shield, someone to stand beside her in the dark. She shook her head, angry at her own weakness. She put the silver bird back in her pocket. "Foolishness," she whispered to the fire. She checked the window shutters one last time. Through the crack, the moon had risen, casting a pale, cold light over the snow. Out there, in the darkness, beyond the fence line, something moved. It was not a coyote. It was too tall. It stood in the shadow of the cottonwood tree, perfectly still. A man. Clara's breath hitched. She blew out the lantern, plunging the cabin into darkness so she could not be seen from outside. She moved to the window, peering out, her heart thudding so loud she feared it would wake the boy. The shadow was gone. Had it been there, or was it just the fatigue and the stories from town playing tricks on her mind? She did not sleep that night. She sat in the rocking chair, the Winchester across her knees, watching the embers of the fire die down to gray ash. She listened to the wind, trying to separate the voice of the storm from the breathing of the intruder. The next morning broke with a deceptive calm. The sky was a hard, brilliant blue. Clara made biscuits and gravy, her movements mechanical. She did not tell Eli about the shadow. She did not want to plant fear in him like a weed, but the signs were there. When she went to the well to draw water, she saw it. The snow around the bucket had been trampled, and on the wooden rim of the well, someone had placed a small, smooth river stone. It was not a threat. It was a message, but a message in a language she did not speak. Clara looked at the vast, empty prairie. It felt different today. It felt crowded. She went back to the cabin and took down the heavy wooden box where she kept her husband's old pistol. She tucked it into the waistband of her skirt, covering it with her apron. "Eli," she called out, "stay close to the house today. We have wood to chop." The boy nodded, sensing the shift in her mood. He picked up the hatchet. "Ma," he said, pausing. "I had a dream last night." Clara froze. "What kind of dream?" "I heard drums," Eli said quietly, "and I smelled cedar burning, and someone was calling me, but they did not call me Eli." "It was just a dream," Clara said, her voice sharp. "Dreams are just the wind in your head." "It felt real," Eli insisted. He had a deep voice, like the river. Clara gripped his shoulders, perhaps a little too tightly. "You are Eli Miller. I found you. I raised you. You are mine. Do you hear me?" Eli looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers. For the first time, Clara saw a flicker of distance in them, a question she could not answer. "Yes, Ma," he whispered. She let him go, her hands trembling. She turned back to the washboard, scrubbing a shirt until her knuckles were raw. The past was not dead. It was not even past. It was out there, riding a horse with red hair, circling closer and closer to the fragile life she had built. Clara Miller was a woman who could skin a rabbit in 2 minutes and shoot a rattlesnake at 20 paces. She was not afraid of hard work or hunger, but she was terrified of the ghost that was coming for her son. She touched the pocket where the silver bird lay hidden. It felt heavy, like a stone around her neck. Whatever was coming, she would face it, but deep down, beneath the fear and the resolve, the treacherous wish whispered again. "I am tired," it said. "I am so tired of being the only wall between him and the world." She pushed the thought away, picked up the axe, and swung it into the log with a grunt of effort. The wood split with a loud crack that echoed across the silent plains, sounding like a gunshot. 3 days passed. The tension in the cabin was as tight as a bowstring. Clara stopped going to town. She kept Eli indoors, teaching him his letters with a fervor that bordered on desperation. "A is for apple," she said, pointing to the slate. "A is for arrow," Eli said, tracing the shape. Clara stared at him. "Where did you learn that word?" "I do not know," Eli said, looking confused. "It just came." Clara erased the slate. "A is for apple. Write it." On the 4th night, the wind died. The silence that followed was heavy and expectant. Clara was mending a tear in Eli's trousers by the light of a single tallow candle. Eli was asleep in the loft, his breathing soft and rhythmic. Then she heard it. It was not a knock. It was a sound of impact, sharp and deliberate. "Thanks." It came from the front door. Clara was on her feet instantly, the pistol in her hand. She motioned for silence, though she was the only one awake. She crept to the door, listening. No footsteps, no voice. She waited 5 minutes, 10. Her muscles cramped with the stillness. Finally, realizing that whoever it was had likely retreated, she reached out and lifted the heavy bar. She opened the door a crack, the pistol barrel leading the way. The night air rushed in, freezing cold. The porch was empty. The yard was empty. But there, stuck into the thick wood of the door at eye level, was a knife. Its handle was wrapped in rawhide, and pinned by the blade was a scrap of leather. Clara pulled the knife free. It required strength. It had been thrown with force. She took the leather scrap inside and held it to the candle. There were words burned into the leather. The letters were blocky and awkward, written by a hand not used to a pen, or perhaps carved with the tip of a heated wire. "We must speak of the boy." Clara stared at the words until they blurred. She felt the blood drain from her face. It was not a ghost. Ghosts did not write notes. She looked up at the loft where Eli slept. He was dreaming of drums and cedar smoke. And outside, in the darkness, the owner of the red horsehair was waiting. Clara Miller blew out the candle. She sat in the chair facing the door, the Winchester across her lap, the pistol on the table beside her. "Come then," she whispered into the dark. "But you will not take him while I breathe." She sat there as the hours ticked by, a solitary figure guarding a stolen treasure. She was a mother. She was a warrior. And she was, for the first time in 4 years, absolutely, terrifyingly certain that her life was about to break in two. The sun would rise in 4 hours. But for Clara, the long night had just begun. The sun did not rise so much as it bled into the sky after the long, sleepless vigil. Clara felt grit in her eyes that had nothing to do with the dust. She sat in the rocking chair, her spine stiff against the wood, the Winchester rifle heavy across her lap. The candle had long since guttered out, leaving a pool of wax on the table like frozen tears. On the door, the knife hole was a small, dark mouth screaming silence. The scrap of leather lay on the table. the crude, burned letters staring up at her. "We must speak of the boy." Clara looked at the loft. Eli was stirring, the innocent sleep of childhood breaking apart as the morning light crept in. She felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it tasted like copper in her mouth. She stood up, her joints popping, and slid the pistol into her apron pocket. She checked the load in the rifle for the 100th time. "Ma!" Eli's voice was thick with sleep. "Is it morning?" "It is morning," Clara said, her voice steady. "But stay inside. The weather is turning." She was not lying. The sky to the north was no longer blue or even gray. It was a wall of churning brown. A bruise spreading across the horizon. A Texas duster was coming. The air pressure dropped, making her ears pop, and the wind began to pick up, whining around the corners of the cabin like a lost soul demanding entry. "Do not open this door. Eli, not for anyone. Not unless I tell you the secret word. Jericho," Eli whispered. It was their word, taken from the story of the walls that came tumbling down. "Jericho," she confirmed. "Now, eat your biscuit." Clara unbarred the door and stepped out. The wind hit her instantly, snatching at her skirts and stinging her cheeks. The world was rapidly losing its color, everything being painted in shades of sepia and rust. The dust was already in the air, a fine powder that tasted of ancient earth and dried bones. She needed to check the livestock. The mule and the mare would panic in a storm like this if they were not secured. She lowered her head against the gale, clutching the rifle, and marched toward the barn. Every shadow looked like a man. Every creak of the windmill sounded like a footstep. She reached the corral fence. The horses were pacing nervously, their ears pinned back, nostrils flared, scenting the ozone and the dirt. Clara calmed the mare with a hand on her neck, murmuring soft nonsense words, her eyes darting to the tree line. Then she saw him. He was not hiding. He was not stalking. He was simply standing there, near the corner of the hayshed, as if he had grown out of the ground itself. He was young, perhaps 24 or 25. He wore buckskins that had seen too many miles, stained with grease and travel. His hair was long and black, unbound, whipping furiously in the wind. But it was his stillness that arrested her. In the midst of the rising storm, with the tumbleweeds beginning to race across the yard, he stood as motionless as a stone pillar. He looked exhausted. His shoulders slumped slightly, and his moccasins were shredded at the toes, but his head was up, and his eyes were locked on the cabin. Clara did not hesitate. She swung the barrel of the Winchester up, leveling it squarely at his chest. "That is close enough," she shouted over the roar of the wind. The young man looked at her. He did not flinch. He did not raise his hands in surrender, nor did he reach for the knife she could see sheathed at his belt. He just looked at her with eyes that were terrifyingly calm. "I said stop," Clara warned, her finger tightening on the trigger. "Turn around and walk away, and you will live to see the sunset." The man took a step forward. "I am not here for your life, woman." His English was broken, heavy with the cadence of the plains, but clear. His voice was raspy, the voice of a man who had swallowed too much dust and silence. "I do not care what you are here for," Clara snapped. "Get off my land." Before the man could answer, the cabin door creaked open. "Ma!" Clara spun her head, panic spiking in her chest. Eli stood on the porch, the wind tearing at his oversized shirt. He had disobeyed. He had heard the shouting and, with the fearless curiosity of a child, had come to look. "Eli, get back inside," Clara screamed, but Eli did not move. He was staring past her, past the gun, directly at the stranger. The young Comanche man stopped breathing. Clara saw the change in him instantly. The fatigue vanished from his posture. His eyes widened, fixing on the boy with a hunger that was painful to witness. It was not the hunger of a predator. It was the hunger of a starving man looking at bread. He took another step, ignoring the rifle aimed at his heart. He raised a trembling hand, reaching out across the 20 yards of wind-swept dirt that separated them. "Tua," he whispered. The word was swallowed by the wind, but Clara read it on his lips. Clara moved. She scrambled backward, placing herself physically between the man and the boy. She made herself a wall. She planted her feet wide, the rifle stock dug into her shoulder. "Do not look at him," she hissed. "Do not you dare look at him." The man's gaze snapped to hers. There was moisture in his eyes, fighting against the grit. "He is alive. He is my son," Clara declared, the lie tasting like ash and iron on her tongue. "He is Eli Miller, and you are trespassing." The man shook his head slowly. "No." He reached into the pouch at his waist. Clara tensed, ready to fire. If he pulled a weapon, she would kill him. She would kill him and bury him before the storm hit, but he did not pull a weapon. He pulled out a small, dark object. He held it up between his thumb and forefinger. It was a piece of silver. Clara felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her light-headed. Even from this distance, she recognized the dull gleam. It was a flat piece of metal, hammered thin. It was jagged along one edge. The man walked forward, slow and deliberate. Clara did not shoot. She could not. The barrel of the rifle lowered an inch, then 2. He stopped 5 paces from her. He held the object out. "Look," he said. Clara looked. It was the bottom half of a bird, a hawk or an eagle, etched with primitive but delicate lines. The talons were clutching nothing, because the bottom half of the circle was missing. No, not missing. Clara's hand went to her pocket. Her fingers brushed the cold metal of the charm she had taken from Eli 4 years ago. The charm she had hidden in the wooden box. The charm she had carried all day yesterday. She pulled it out. Her hand shook violently. The man saw it. He saw the top half of the bird in her hand, the head, the spread wings. He did not smile. He did not triumph. He simply let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "He is my son," the man said. His voice was no longer a whisper. It was a statement of fact, as undeniable as the ground beneath their feet and the storm in the sky. Clara stared at the 2 pieces of silver. In her mind's eye, she saw them clicking together. She saw the perfect circle they would make. "No," she whispered. "No." 4 years, the man said. He looked past her again, at Eli. The boy was still standing on the porch, freezing in the wind, his eyes wide and confused. He looked from Clara to the man, and back to Clara. "Ma!" Eli called out. His voice was thin and frightened. "Who is he?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the dust. Clara turned to look at Eli. She wanted to lie. She wanted to say he was a beggar, a drifter, a liar. She wanted to scream that she had bathed Eli when he was sick, that she had held him through the nightmares, that she had taught him to read and to pray. She wanted to scream that labor pains did not make a mother love did. But the silver bird in her hand burned like coal. She turned back to the stranger. "Who are you?" "My name is Noah," he said. "It is the name the trader gave me. My people called me Rides with the Wind. But that life is gone." "Noah," Clara repeated. It was a biblical name, a safe name. It did not fit the wildness of his hair or the intensity of his eyes. "Where were you?" Clara demanded, her voice rising, finding her anger again. It was safer to be angry than to be heartbroken. "Where were you when he was 4 years old? Where were you when he was bleeding in the ditch? Where were you when he was screaming for a mother who was dead?" Noah flinched as if she had struck him. "I was fighting. The soldiers came. The blue coats. They separated the wagons. I was cut off. I took an arrow in the shoulder." He touched his left shoulder absently. "When I got back, the wagons were burned. The bodies were there. My wife." He stopped, swallowing hard. "I found her, but I did not find the boy. I found tracks. I have followed the tracks for 4 moons, times 12. "I saved him," Clara said, her voice shaking. "He was starving. He was wild with fear. I saved him." "I know," Noah said. He looked at her with a strange expression. It was not gratitude, exactly, but it was respect. "I see he is strong. I see he is fed. You have done good." "Then go," Clara said. "If you are grateful, go, leave him be. He is happy. He does not know you." "He knows me," Noah said softly. He looked at the boy. "The blood knows." Eli stepped off the porch. He ignored the wind. He walked slowly toward them, his eyes fixed on Noah. "Eli, stay back," Clara warned. But Eli did not stop until he was standing beside Clara. He looked up at the tall stranger. He looked at the copper skin that was the same shade as his own. He looked at the high cheekbones, the shape of the nose. It was like looking into a mirror that showed the future. Noah dropped to one knee. He was now eye level with the boy. He did not reach out to touch him. He just breathed him in. "Do you know me, little hawk?" Noah asked in the Comanche tongue. Then he repeated it in English. "Do you know me?" Eli frowned. He rubbed his temple. I remember the smell," he whispered. "Smoke and sage." Noah reached into his shirt and pulled out a small bundle of dried sage. He held it out. Eli smelled it. His eyes rolled back for a second, a flash of vertigo hitting him. "Pa?" The word was a question, faint and terrified. Clara felt her heart stop. The world tilted on its axis. The wind roared. The dust stung. But she heard nothing but that single syllable. "Pa? Ma?" Eli turned to her, grabbing her skirt with desperate hands. "Ma, who is he? Am I not yours?" Clara looked down at the boy she loved more than her own life. She saw the terror in his eyes. He was looking at the cracks in his foundation, the sudden earthquake that threatened to swallow his identity. She could not lie to him, not with the silver bird in her hand, but she could not give him up. "You are mine, Eli," she said fiercely, pulling him against her hip. "You are mine because I chose you, and I have never let you go." She glared at Noah. "You have no rights here. The law does not know you. The sheriff will arrest you if you step into town. You are a ghost. Noah, go back to being a ghost." Noah stood up slowly. The wind was howling now, a full gale. The dust was so thick they could barely see the barn. "I cannot go," Noah said. "I am hunted. The men with the badges, they are close. And I am tired." He looked at the sky. "The storm is bad. It brings death to those without shelter." Clara looked at the sky too. He was right. To turn a man out into this, even a Comanche, even a stranger, was a death sentence. And if he died on her doorstep, his ghost would haunt Eli forever. She struggled with herself. Every instinct screamed at her to shoot, to drive him away, to erase this threat. But she was Clara Miller. She was a woman who read the Bible. She was a woman who had saved a boy from a ditch. "The barn," she said, the words grinding out of her throat like gravel. Noah looked at her. "You can sleep in the tack room in the barn." Clara said, "There are blankets. There is water in the trough. But you do not step foot in my cabin. You do not speak to the boy unless I am there. You do not come near the windows." She raised the rifle again. "If I see you near the house tonight, I will put a bullet in you. Do you understand?" Noah nodded slowly. "I understand. A roof is a mercy. I ask for nothing else tonight." He looked at Eli one last time, a look of agonizing longing. Then he turned and walked toward the barn, disappearing into the swirling brown cloud like a spirit returning to the earth. Clara stood there for a moment, the wind tearing at her hair. She looked at the silver piece in her hand. She squeezed it until the sharp edges cut into her palm. "Come inside, Eli," she said, her voice hollow. She ushered the boy back into the cabin and slammed the door against the storm. She dropped the heavy bar into place with a thud that sounded like a prison door closing. The cabin was dim and warm, smelling of the rabbit stew she had started earlier. It smelled of home, but the air had changed. The safety was gone. Eli stood in the middle of the room, shivering. "Ma, is he my father?" Clara knelt before him. She took his small hands in hers. She wanted to weep, but she did not have the luxury of tears. "He is a man who lost something a long time ago," Clara said carefully. "But you are my son, Eli. Do not ever forget that." "He had the other half of the bird," Eli whispered. "Yes," Clara said. "He did." She stood up and went to the window. She peered through the crack in the shutter. She could not see the barn through the driving dust, but she knew he was there. Noah, the father, the threat. He was in her barn, breathing her air, waiting out the storm. Clara touched the pistol in her apron. She knew, with a sinking dread, that the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm that had just walked into her life. The wind would die down tomorrow, but Noah would still be there, and he had said it with the conviction of a man who had walked through hell to find his way back. He is my son. Clara Miller realized then that she was not just fighting for a house or a piece of land anymore. She was fighting for the soul of the boy standing behind her, and for the first time in her life. She was not sure if she was the hero of the story or the villain standing in the way of a reunion written in blood. "Go to the loft, Eli," she said softly. "It is going to be a long night." She sat back down in the rocking chair, the rifle across her knees, and fixed her eyes on the barred door. She would keep her promise. She would wait, but the silence in the cabin was no longer empty. It was filled with the echo of a name she had tried to bury for 4 years. Pa. The word hung in the rafters, waiting for the dust to settle. The road to town was a slurry of half-frozen mud that sucked at the wagon wheels with a greedy, wet sound. Clara drove the mare with grim determination, her knuckles white beneath her gloves. Beside her, Eli sat wrapped in a heavy wool blanket, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the gray sky met the flat, brown earth. He had been silent since breakfast, a silence that felt heavy and unnatural for a boy who usually chattered about hawks and rabbit tracks. They left Noah behind in the barn. It was a risk leaving him there, unguarded, near her home, but taking him into town was a death sentence. The storm had passed, but the air remained thick with a tension that felt like the drop in pressure before a tornado. Clara pulled the wagon up in front of the sheriff's office. It was a brick building, one of the few in town, implying a permanence the rest of the settlement lacked. "Stay here, Eli," Clara instructed. "Watch the wagon." "I want to go with you," Eli said, his voice small. "Stay with the wagon," she repeated, sharper than she intended. She softened immediately. "Please, I will only be a moment." She stepped inside. The office smelled of stale tobacco smoke and gun oil. Sheriff Brady was sitting behind his desk, cleaning a fingernail with a penknife. He was a thick-set man with a mustache that hid his mouth, making his expressions difficult to read. "Widow Miller," he said, not standing up. "Roads are bad for a joyride." "I am not here for a joyride, Sheriff," Clara said. She stood before his desk, refusing to take the chair he did not offer. "I have a question about the law." Brady looked up, his interest piqued. "The law usually. Folks come to me when a horse is stolen or a drunk is breaking windows." "What sort of law?" "Custody," Clara said. If a child has been raised by a guardian for 4 years, and a biological parent appears, what does the law say?" Brady stopped cleaning his nails. He looked at her, and Clara saw the calculation in his eyes. He knew about Eli. Everyone knew about Eli. "Are you talking about the boy?" Brady asked bluntly. "I am talking about a hypothetical situation." Clara lied badly. Brady sighed and leaned back, the chair groaning under his weight. "Clara, look. In the eyes of the territory, possession is 9/10 of the law, especially with livestock and property. But with children, it gets messy." He paused, weighing his words. "If the parent is a white Christian man with property, the judge will hand the child over before the gavel hits the wood. If the parent is drunk or transient, maybe not." "What if the parent is an Indian?" Clara asked. The silence that followed was absolute. Brady let out a short, harsh laugh that held no humor. "An Indian," Brady shook his head. "Clara, a Comanche cannot walk into a courtroom in Texas and demand anything. He has no standing, no birth certificate, no marriage license recognized by the church, no citizenship. To the law, he is not a plaintiff. He is a ward of the state at best, and a fugitive at worst. So he has no rights. He has the right to be sent to the reservation at Fort Sill," Brady said, "or the right to be shot if he makes a fuss. Why are you asking, has someone come sniffing around?" Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. No, just reading the newspapers. There are stories about families being reunited. Don't believe everything you read, Brady said, his eyes narrowing. You keep that boy close. You raised him decently. Don't let some savage ghost story scare you. Clara walked out of the office, her legs feeling unsteady. The law was clear. It was a shield for some and a sword for others. Noah had no weapon in this fight but his word, and his word was worth nothing in this town. As she climbed back into the wagon, she felt the eyes of the town upon her. Mrs. Higgins was sweeping the boardwalk in front of the dry goods store, pausing to whisper to the baker's wife. They looked at Clara, then at Eli, their faces pinched with a mixture of pity and suspicion. I heard she found him in a burned wagon, Mrs. Higgins's voice drifted on the wind. But look at the nose on him. Blood tells. Maybe she is bewitched, the baker's wife replied. Living out there alone, it does things to a woman's mind. Clara snapped the reins, and the mare lurched forward. She wanted to scream at them. She wanted to tell them that their Christian charity was as thin as the ice on the horse trough. But she kept her chin high and her eyes forward. Beside her, Eli sank lower into his blanket, trying to make himself small. He had heard them too. The ride back was agonizing. Every mile felt like a betrayal. If she told the sheriff about Noah, the problem would be solved. Noah would be arrested or chased off. She would keep Eli. It would be legal. It would be safe. But as she looked at the vast, empty prairie, she remembered Noah's eyes. He is my son. There was no malice in him, only a desperate, aching love that mirrored her own. Could she destroy a man for the crime of surviving when they arrived back at the cabin? The sun was beginning to dip, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. The wind had died down, leaving a stillness that amplified every sound. Eli ran inside to warm himself by the fire. Clara unhitched the horse and led her to the barn. Noah was not in the tack room. Panic flared in Clara's chest. Had he taken something? Had he come into the house while they were gone? She stepped out the back of the barn and saw him. He was down by the river, 100 yards away, kneeling by the water. Clara checked the load in her pocket pistol and walked down the slope toward him. The dry grass crunched beneath her boots. Noah did not turn, but she knew he heard her. You should not be out in the open, she said. Noah stood up and turned. He had washed his face. The grime of the journey was gone, revealing a handsome, angular face that looked younger than she had first thought. But his eyes were old. The wind carries sound, he said. I heard the wagon coming long before you saw the roof. The sheriff says you have no rights, Clara said, deciding to use the truth as a weapon. He says a judge would not even hear you. I do not need a judge to tell me what is mine, Noah replied calmly. And how do you know he is yours? Clara challenged, stepping closer. Because of a piece of silver that could be stolen. Because he looks like you. Half the tribes on the plains have hair like that. Noah looked at her, and then he began to unbutton his buckskin shirt. What are you doing? Clara took a step back, her hand going to her pistol. Noah pulled the shirt down over his left shoulder. There, marring the copper skin, was a thick, jagged scar. It looked like a burn and a cut combined, a roadmap of violence etched into his flesh. 4 years ago, Noah said. We were near the crossing. The traders came, not soldiers, men who steal people. They wanted the women and the children. They sell them to Mexico, or to the mines, or to families who want servants. Clara felt sick. She had heard of such men, Comancheros, or renegade whites who dealt in human misery. I fought, Noah continued, pulling his shirt back up. I killed one, but there were too many. They hit me with a rifle butt. Then they shot me. I fell into the river. The current took me. When I woke up, I was miles downstream. I crawled back. It took 2 days. He looked at the river, his voice dropping to a whisper. The wagons were burned. My wife was dead. But the boy, he was not there. Nobody, no bones. I knew they had taken him, or he had run. Clara looked at the water rushing over the stones. She thought of Eli's wrist, the thin white scar that looked like a rope burn. They sell them. I found him, Clara said, her voice trembling. He was hiding under a canvas. He was half dead from smoke. If he was running from slavers, he has the heart of a coyote, Noah said with a faint smile. He is clever. He escaped. Clara felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. If Noah was telling the truth and the scar, the timing, the silver bird all screamed that he was, then she was not just a savior. She was the person standing between a father and the son he had bled to find. I cannot give him up, Clara whispered. It was a confession. I cannot. He is my life. Noah, he is the only thing that makes this cabin a home. Noah looked at her, and for the first time, she saw pity in his eyes. I know. I see how you look at him. You are a mother to him. I do not want to tear the heart out of your chest, Clara, but I cannot walk away and leave my heart behind either. He did not demand it. He did not threaten. He simply stated the impossible geometry of their situation. Two people, one child, and a world that would destroy them all if they were not careful. I need time, Clara said. He does not remember you. He is scared. I have time, Noah said. I have waited 4 years. I can wait a few days more. The next 3 days were a strange, suspended reality. Noah did not come to the cabin. He stayed in the barn or by the river, but his presence was felt everywhere. When a section of the split rail fence collapsed under the weight of a drifted snowbank, Clara went out to fix it, only to find the rails already reset and lashed tight with rawhide, stronger than before. When she went to check the rabbit traps, she found them empty, but on the porch railing lay a brace of fat grouse, cleaned and ready for the pot. He was paying his way. He was showing her that he was not a parasite. He was a provider, but Eli was unraveling. On the second night, Clara woke to the sound of whimpering. She climbed up the ladder to the loft. Eli was thrashing in his bed, his sheets tangled around his legs. No, he mumbled. No rope, no rope. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and shook him gently. Eli, wake up. You are safe. Eli gasped and sat up, his eyes wide and unseeing in the dark. He smelled of sweat and terror. Ma, he choked out. I heard the drums again. And the smell, cedar, it is just a dream. Clara soothed, pulling him into her arms. I remembered a word, Eli whispered against her shoulder. Appa. Clara froze. She did not know the language, but the way he said it, with such childish longing, broke her heart. What does it mean? She asked, dreading the answer. I think it means up, Eli said, like, pick me up. It was a memory of being held, of being small and lifted high by strong arms. Go back to sleep, Eli, Clara said, kissing his forehead. But she knew the door was opening. The wall of amnesia she had relied on was crumbling, brick by brick. The danger arrived on a Tuesday, riding 4 horses that looked as mean as the men sitting on them. Clara was in the yard, chopping wood. The rhythm of the axe was her only comfort. Thwack, thwack, thwack. She heard the hoofbeats and stopped. 4 men were riding up the lane. They wore long dusters and wide-brimmed hats. They did not look like cowboys, and they certainly did not look like lawmen. They looked like trouble looking for a place to happen. The leader was a man with a face like a dried apple, wrinkled and hard. He rode a large roan stallion. He stopped 10 feet from Clara, looking down at her with eyes that were flat and dead. Afternoon, ma'am, he said. He did not touch his hat. Afternoon, Clara said, resting the axe head on the ground, the handle leaning against her thigh. She wished she had her rifle. Can I help you? We are looking for a stray, the man said. A buck, Comanche, young, about 25, goes by the name Noah, or something heathen. Clara felt her heart hammer against her ribs. I do not see many Indians out here. The army keeps them on the reservation. This one ain't on the reservation, one of the other men sneered. He was younger, with a scar running through his eyebrow. He is a runner. Killed a man down near the Brazos. Stole a horse. He killed a man, Clara asked, feigning shock. Bashed his head in. The leader said, "We represent the railroad and the land commission. That boy is wanted for murder and theft. There is a $50 reward on his scalp, alive or dead, mostly dead." Clara looked at them. They were lying. Or rather, they were telling a version of the truth that served them. Noah had said he killed a man who was trying to enslave him. To these men, that was murder. To Clara, it was defense. But looking at the heavy pistols on their hips and the coiled ropes on their saddles, she realized the truth. They were not lawmen. They were bounty hunters. And if they found Noah, there would be no trial. They would hang him from the nearest cottonwood tree and collect their $50. "I have not seen him," Clara said, keeping her voice steady. "I live here alone with my son. I would know if a savage was lurking about." The leader looked at her. He looked at the cabin. He looked at the barn. His gaze lingered on the barn for a long, terrifying moment. "You sure about that, widow?" he asked softly. "Tracks lead this way, and then the wind blew them out, but he was heading north." "I'm sure," Clara said. "If I see him, I will shoot him myself." The leader chuckled. It was a dry, rasping sound. "I bet you would. A woman out here has to be tough." He turned his horse. "We will be in town for a few days, staying at the hotel. If you see anything at all, you send word to Mr. Vance. There might be a few dollars in it for you." "I will do that," Clara said. She watched them ride away. They did not go far. They turned east, toward the river crossing, cutting for signs. Clara dropped the axe. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely make a fist. She had done it. She had lied to white men to protect a Comanche. She had broken the unwritten code of the frontier. She ran to the barn. Noah was standing in the shadows of the tack room, holding an old pitchfork. He had been listening. "They are gone," Clara said, breathless. "They will be back," Noah said. His face was grim. "Those are not men who give up. They smell gold." "Why do they want you so badly?" Clara asked. $50 is a lot for a runaway." "It is not just the money," Noah said. "I saw things at the camp where they held me. I saw who they were selling the people to. I saw the papers. One of the men, he was not a bandit. He wore a suit. He worked for a big company." Clara understood then. Noah was at a loose end. He was a witness to a crime that powerful men wanted buried. "You cannot stay here," Clara said. "If they find you in my barn, I will go," Noah said immediately. "Tonight. Once the moon is down." "No!" The word burst out of Clara before she could stop it. Noah looked at her, surprised. Clara took a deep breath. "If you go out there tonight, they will find you. They are watching the river. They are watching the roads. They are hunters. Noah, they know the land as well as you do." "I cannot stay," Noah said. "I will bring danger to the boy." "You are the boy's father," Clara said. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. She had finally said it aloud. Noah went still. "I am not giving him to you," Clara added quickly, her defenses snapping back into place. "Do not think that, but I will not send you out to be butchered like a steer. Not while you are on my land." "Why?" Noah asked. "You hate me. I am the thief who comes for your treasure." "Because," Clara said, looking him in the eye, "because Eli remembers the word for pick me up." "And because you fixed my fence." She turned to leave the barn, pausing at the door. "Hide in the loft of the barn," she commanded. "Burrow into the hay. Do not come out. I will bring food when it is dark. If they come back, you stay hidden, unless they threaten Eli. Then you do what you have to do." "I will," Noah said. "I swear it." Clara walked back to the cabin. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the snow. She felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders. She had chosen a side, and it was the side that could get them all killed. Inside the cabin, Eli was sitting at the table, tracing the letters in the Bible. "Ma," he asked, "who were those men?" "Bad men," Clara said, locking the door. "Just bad men." "Did they come for the man in the barn?" Eli asked. Clara froze. She turned slowly. "You know he is there." Eli nodded. "I saw him. Yesterday, when you were gathering eggs, he was fixing the roof. He put a finger to his lips. He told me to be quiet. Did he speak to you? He said Tua, Eli whispered. He said it means son. Clara closed her eyes. The walls she had built were not just crumbling, they were gone. The truth was loose in the house, sitting at the dinner table with them. We will talk about it later, Clara said, her voice trembling. Right now, we need to eat, and we need to be very, very quiet. She lit the lamp, keeping the wick low. Outside, the night settled over the plains, vast and indifferent. Somewhere in town, Mr. Vance was drinking whiskey and planning a hunt. In the barn, Noah was sharpening his knife. And here, in the cabin, Clara Miller was trying to figure out how to save a family that was sewn together with scars and secrets. She looked at the window. Her reflection stared back, pale and ghostly. She wondered if she would recognize herself when this was all over. The sky turned the color of a bruised plum, heavy and swollen with a violence that made the livestock restless. It was not the dry, scouring wind of the previous week. This was a spring deluge, sudden and catastrophic. The rain began as a whisper and grew into a roar, hammering the roof of the cabin with enough force to drown out thought. Clara stood by the window, watching the water sheet off the eaves. The creek that ran through the lower pasture, usually a lazy trickle, was rising fast. She could hear it growling, a deep, earthy sound of moving mud and debris. The Hendersons, Eli said. He was standing beside her, his nose pressed against the cold glass. They live at the bottom, by the bend. Clara felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. The Henderson family had a cabin built too close to the water line. They were good people, a young couple with a baby who had been sickly all winter. The water will be up to their porch by now, Clara murmured. We have to help them, Eli said. He turned to look at her, his dark eyes fierce. You told me, Ma. You said neighbors are surviving. You said we do not leave people behind. Clara looked at the boy. He was quoting her own law back to her. It was the code of the frontier, written in blood and necessity. But the road was a quagmire, and the ford would be impassable. It is too dangerous. Eli, the wagon will bog down. We do not need the wagon, a voice said from the shadows. Noah stood in the doorway of the bedroom, where he had been keeping watch. He moved silently, like smoke. We need horses and rope. Clara looked at him. He was a fugitive with a price on his head, hiding in her home, eating her food. Yet here he was, volunteering to ride into a flood. If you go out there, Clara said, her voice low, and anyone sees you. If we do not go, Noah interrupted, the water will take them. The spirits of the river are angry today. Clara looked back at the rain. She thought of the Henderson baby, wailing in a cradle as the muddy water rose around the legs of the bed. Saddle the mare, Clara said, her decision made. Take the mule for carrying. I will get the medical kit. The ride to Henderson Place was a battle against the elements. The rain fell in sheets so thick it was like riding through a waterfall. The ground was slick, threatening to break a horse's leg with every step. Noah rode the mare, looking as if he were part of the animal, his body moving in perfect rhythm with her struggles. Clara rode behind him on the mule, clutching Eli to her waist. When they reached the ridge overlooking the creek, Clara gasped. The creek was gone. In its place was a churning torrent of brown water, tearing at the banks and carrying entire trees downstream. The Henderson cabin was an island in the middle of the flood. The water was already halfway up the door. On the roof, huddled against the chimney, were 3 figures. They are trapped. Eli shouted over the roar of the water. Stay here, Noah commanded. He dismounted and handed the reins to Clara. He grabbed the coil of heavy hemp rope from the saddle horn. What are you going to do? Clara screamed over the wind. I am going to swim, Noah said. He stripped off his heavy coat and boots. You will drown, Clara cried out, a sudden, sharp fear piercing her chest. Noah looked at her. Rainwater streamed down his face, plastering his black hair to his skull. His eyes were calm, anchored in a deep, ancient certainty. Hold the rope. Clara, do not let go. He tied one end of the rope around his waist and plunged into the raging water. The current seized him immediately. Sweeping him downstream, Clara slammed her heels into the ground, bracing the mule, wrapping the rope around the saddle horn. The line went taut, vibrating like a plucked cello string. She watched, her heart hammering against her ribs, as Noah fought the river. He did not fight it with brute strength alone. He used the current, angling his body, letting the water carry him toward the cabin. He was debris. He was driftwood. He was a creature of the flood. He slammed into the side of the cabin, gripping the eaves. He pulled himself up onto the roof. Clara saw him speak to Mr. Henderson. She saw him take the baby from Mrs. Henderson's arms. He tied the baby to his chest with a strip of cloth. Then he tied the rope around Mrs. Henderson's waist. He signaled to Clara. "Pull!" Clara shouted to the mule. "Pull! Bess!" It took an hour of agonizing, back-breaking work. One by one, they brought them across. First the mother, terrified and weeping. Then the husband, who could barely swim. And finally, Noah, carrying the child. When Noah collapsed on the muddy bank, his chest heaving, the Henderson baby let out a thin, high wail. It was the sweetest sound Clara had ever heard. Mrs. Henderson crawled over to Noah. She did not see a Comanche. She did not see a savage. She grabbed his hand and kissed it, sobbing. "Thank you. Oh, God, thank you." Noah looked uncomfortable. He pulled his hand away gently. "The water's cold," was all he said. They brought the family into town. There was nowhere else to go. Clara's cabin was too small and too far for the sick child. They rode down the main street, a strange procession covered in mud and exhaustion. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. People stepped out of the stores and saloons to watch. Sheriff Brady stood on the porch of his office, his thumbs hooked in his belt. They stopped in front of the house of Dr. Reynolds. Clara slid off the mule, her legs trembling. "We need help," she called out. "The Henderson baby has a fever, and they nearly drowned." Dr. Reynolds, a balding man with kind eyes, rushed out. He took the baby from Mrs. Henderson. But the town's eyes were not on the doctor. They were on Noah. Noah sat on the mare, shivering slightly in his wet clothes. He looked wild and dangerous, yet he sat with a quiet dignity that silenced the whispers. "Who is that?" someone asked. "That is the Indian who pulled my wife out of the river," Mr. Henderson announced, his voice shaking but loud. "He saved us. He saved my boy." The silence that followed was heavy. The narrative of the town that the Comanche were monsters, thieves, killers crackled and popped under the weight of the truth standing before them. Sheriff Brady walked down the steps. He stopped in front of Noah's horse. He looked at the rope burns on Noah's chest, the exhaustion in his face. "You have a name, son?" Brady asked. "Noah," he replied. "Well, Noah," Brady said, spitting into the mud. "You did a good thing today." "Ride on." It was not accepted. It was not a pardon, but it was a reprieve. For one moment, the act of saving a life had outweighed the color of his skin, but not everyone was looking at Noah with gratitude. Standing under the awning of the bank was a man in a gray suit. He was clean, dry, and sharp-featured. This was Mr. Sterling, the land agent for the railroad. Beside him stood Mr. Vance, the bounty hunter. Clara saw them. She saw Vance whisper something to Sterling. She saw Sterling's eyes flick from Noah to Eli, and then settle on her with a predatory gleam. "We have to go," Clara said. "Mounting the mule. Now." The reprieve did not last. 2 days later, the sun was out, mocking the muddy earth with its cheerfulness. Clara was hanging laundry when a rider approached. It was not the sheriff. It was a clerk from the bank. He handed her an envelope and rode away without a word. Clara opened it. Her hands were raw from the lye soap, and the paper felt impossibly smooth and expensive against her skin. It was a notice of foreclosure. "Dear Mrs. Miller," it read, "due to the reassessment of property boundaries required by the impending railroad expansion, and outstanding property taxes which have now been adjusted for inflation and interest, you are in arrears in the amount of $240. Payment is due in full within 30 days, or the property will be seized by the Territory Bank. $240. It might as well have been $1 million. Clara sank onto the porch steps. The air left her lungs. This was not about taxes. She had paid her taxes. This was theft. This was the railroad wanting her land because it lay near the proposed water depot. And they were using the law to take it. Bad news. Clara looked up. Noah was standing by the corner of the house. He had been repairing the roof where the storm had torn away shingles. Clara handed him the letter. She did not know if he could read. He looked at it, his eyes scanning the dense, legal language. "They want the land," he said. He understood enough. "They want everything," Clara said bitterly. "They want the land. They want you dead. And they want Eli." She stopped. "They want Eli." "Why?" Noah asked. "Because he is leveraged," Clara said, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "Sterling, the banker. He saw us. He saw you with Eli. If they take the land, I have nowhere to go. If I have nowhere to go, they can declare me unfit. They can put Eli in an orphanage. Or worse." Noah sat down on the step below her. He picked up a stick and drew a line in the dirt. "This is a trap. The hunter, Vance. He works for this banker." "I think so," Clara said. "Vance wants the reward for you. Sterling wants the land. They are scratching each other's backs." Noah was silent for a long time. He watched a hawk circling high above the prairie. "I will leave," he said. Clara turned to him. "What?" "I will leave," Noah repeated. "If I am not here, Vance has no reason to circle your house. If I draw him away, lead him south toward the Brazos, the heat will leave you. You can fight the banker with the law if the hunter is gone." "You will be killed," Clara said. "Vance has 4 men. You are alone." "I am Comanche," Noah said, a faint smile touching his lips. "I am never alone on the plains. The wind is my brother. The grass is my sister." "Do not talk like a mystic," Clara snapped, though her voice wavered. "Talk like a man who bleeds." "I bleed," Noah said seriously. "But I will not let my son watch me bleed on his doorstep." He turned to her, his dark eyes intense and pleading. "I will go, but I ask for one thing, one price for my life." "What?" Clara asked. "Give me 1 day." Noah said, "Tomorrow. Let me take Eli to the old stone shelter by the river. It is safe. It is hidden. Let me spend 1 day with him. Not as a stranger, not as a ghost in the barn, as his father. Let me tell him who he is. Let me give him his name." "He is too young," Clara protested. "It will confuse him. He is old enough to remember the smell of smoke," Noah said. "He is old enough to know he has a hole in his heart. Let me fill it. Clara, just for 1 day. Then I will go, and I will never come back." Clara looked at him. She saw the desperation he was holding back. She saw the father who had walked through hell for 4 years, only to be asked to walk away again. "1 day," Clara whispered, "from sunrise to sunset, and you bring him back before the first star shines." "I swear it," Noah said. The next day was agonizing for Clara. She paced the cabin floor, cleaning things that were already clean. She watched the sun track across the sky, measuring the hours of her son's life that belonged to another. But the evening brought a strange calm. Noah brought Eli back exactly as promised, just as the sun was touching the horizon. Eli looked tired, but his eyes were shining with a light Clara had never seen before. He carried a new bow made of ash wood, and a quiver of arrows fletched with turkey feathers. "Ma!" Eli cried, running to her. "He showed me how to listen to the ground. He told me about the buffalo." Noah stood by the gate. He did not come in. He looked at Clara and gave a single, curt nod. Debt paid. But the danger was not gone. The air felt heavy, charged with static. "Stay tonight," Clara said to Noah as he turned to the barn. "It is cold, and I do not think you should be alone tonight." She led him to the old root cellar, dug into the side of the hill behind the cabin. It was dry and warm, used for storing potatoes and turnips, but she had cleared a space and laid down buffalo robes. It was safer than the barn. It had only 1 door, and it was hidden from the road. She brought him coffee and a plate of cornbread. Outside, the wind had picked up again, a lonely, whistling sound. They sat on the buffalo robes, the lantern casting long, dancing shadows on the earthen walls. "Did you tell him?" Clara asked. "I told him," Noah said. "I told him his mother loved him. I told him his name was Little Hawk. I told him he comes from a people who were the lords of the plains." "And did you tell him you are leaving?" Noah looked down at his coffee cup. "I told him I have a long ride to make. I told him that a father watches over his son, even from far away." Clara felt a lump in her throat. "He will miss you." "He has you," Noah said. He looked up, his eyes locking onto hers. "You are a good mother, Clara Miller, better than he deserves, better than I deserve. I am just a woman trying to keep a roof over our heads," Clara said, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You are strong," Noah said, "like the mesquite tree. You bend, but you do not break." He reached out and took the empty cup from her hand. His fingers brushed hers. The contact was electric. It was rough skin against rough skin, calloused palm against calloused palm. It was the touch of two people who had worked until their hands were hard, but whose hearts remained dangerously soft. Clara did not pull away. She looked at his hand, covering hers. It was a dark hand, scarred and capable, a hand that had killed men and cradled a baby. "I have been alone for a long time. Noah," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "I forgot what it feels like to have someone on my side." "You are not alone," Noah said. His voice was a low rumble. He leaned forward. The movement was slow, giving her every chance to retreat. She did not retreat. She leaned in to meet him. Their lips met. It was not the polished, theatrical kiss of a romance novel. It was desperate. It was the kiss of two survivors finding solace in the dark. It tasted of coffee and sorrow. It was short, a brief collision of souls, but it shook Clara to her very foundation. She pulled back, breathless. Her hand came up to touch her mouth. Noah looked at her, his eyes dark pools of emotion. "Clara," he said her name like it was a prayer. "We cannot," Clara said, her voice cracking. "The world, the town, they would kill us both." "I do not care about the town," Noah said fiercely. "I do," Clara said. "I have to raise Eli in it." The reality of their world crashed back in. The moment shattered, leaving sharp shards of regret. Suddenly, Noah stiffened. He turned his head toward the door, his body going rigid as a bowstring. "What is it?" Clara asked. "Hush," Noah commanded. He stood up and extinguished the lantern, plunging them into absolute darkness. "They are here," he whispered. "Who?" "The hunters. Vance. I smell the tobacco and horse sweat." Clara's heart stopped. "Here now." "They found the tracks," Noah said. "My tracks, from the river crossing. I was careless." He moved to the door, opening it a fraction of an inch. "They are surrounding the cabin. They think I am inside with you and the boy." "Oh, God," Clara breathed. "Eli is in the cabin." "They will not hurt Eli if they get what they want," Noah said. "They want me." He turned back to her in the dark. She could not see his face, but she could feel the heat of him. "I have to go," he said. "I will make a noise. I will draw them away from the house. I will lead them into the canyon." "No," Clara grabbed his arm. "They will kill you. There are 4 of them." "He is my son," Noah said. "And you are the woman who gave him back to me." He took her hand one last time and pressed it to his chest. She could feel his heart beating, strong and steady. "Stay here," he commanded. "Do not come out until the shooting stops." Noah. He was gone. Clara stood in the darkness of the root cellar, alone again. She heard a shout from the yard, then the crack of a rifle. Then the thunder of hooves tore away from the house, heading north toward the broken lands. She fell to her knees, the damp earth soaking into her skirt. He had done it. He had offered himself up as the prey to lead the wolves away from the flock. She thought of the kiss. She thought of the way his hand had felt on hers. And she realized, with a terrifying clarity, that she had broken her vow. She had let someone in, And now, he was riding to his death to save her. Clara Miller grabbed her skirts and ran toward the cabin, her mind screaming one name. Not Eli, Noah. The makeshift courtroom was set up in the back of the mercantile, where the smell of dry goods and leather usually comforted Clara. Today, the air was thick with the scent of stale tobacco, unwashed bodies, and the sharp, metallic tang of impending ruin. It was Wednesday, the day of the hearing. Outside, the wind had returned, a relentless, dry gale that rattled the window panes and set the horses in the street to stamping. Inside, half the town had squeezed into the room, their faces a mixture of curiosity and grim anticipation. A widow losing her land was a spectator sport in a place where boredom was the only surplus. Clara sat on a hard wooden bench, her back straight as a plumb line. She wore her best dress, the dark blue calico she usually saved for church, though the collar was frayed at the edges. Her hands were folded in her lap, gripping a small sheaf of papers, tax receipts, the original deed, and a letter from the bank that she had read until the ink was blurred. Beside her sat Eli. He was wearing his Sunday shirt, which was too tight on the shoulders. His legs dangled off the bench, swinging nervously. He looked small, terrified, and painfully out of place. He kept looking at the door, his dark eyes wide and searching. Opposite them sat Mr. Sterling. The land agent looked immaculate in his gray suit, not a speck of dust on his shoulders. He was whispering to Mr. Vance, the bounty hunter. Vance looked worse for wear. His coat was torn, and there was a bandage wrapped around his left hand. They had not caught their prey the night before, and Vance radiated a foul, simmering anger. Judge Holloway banged his gavel. It was actually a carpenter's mallet, but it silenced the room all the same. "This court is now in session," Holloway announced. He was a tired man with a face like a collapsed mine shaft, worn down by the harshness of the territory. "We are here to settle the matter of the foreclosure on the Miller property. Mr. Sterling, you may state your claim." Sterling stood up, smoothing his vest. He spoke with the oily confidence of a man who knows the deck is stacked in his favor. "Your Honor, the bank has been more than patient. Mrs. Miller is in arrears for property taxes and loan interest in the amount of $240. The railroad expansion requires clear titles. We have offered her a fair price to sell, which she has refused. We are now forced to seize the asset to cover the debt." "I have $50. Clara spoke up, her voice ringing clear over the murmurs of the crowd. She stood up, holding out a small pouch. "I sold the mule. I have next season's harvest pledged. I just need time." "Time does not build railroads." "Mrs. Miller," Sterling said, his smile tight and condescending. "And $50 is not $240? The law is precise. The law is being used as a bludgeon," Clara retorted. "You raised the assessment value 3 times in 6 months. You are trying to squeeze me out because my land sits on the water table?" "That is speculation," Sterling dismissed. He turned to the judge. "But there is a more pressing matter. Your Honor, the welfare of the child." Clara felt a cold hand grip her heart. "Leave my son out of this," Sterling gestured to Eli. "Is he your son legally? There are no adoption papers, no records. And given the disturbing reports of a fugitive Comanche lurking around your property, we believe the environment is unsafe. If the land is seized, Mrs. Miller will be destitute. The bank recommends the boy be placed in the custody of the Territorial Orphanage in Austin until a suitable home can be found." "No!" Eli cried out. He grabbed Clara's arm, burying his face in her skirt. "You will not touch him," Clara hissed, stepping between Sterling and the boy. "He is not a piece of furniture you can auction off. He is a ward of the state if you cannot feed him," Sterling said coldly. "Sheriff Brady, please secure the boy." Sheriff Brady, standing by the door, looked uncomfortable. He shifted his weight. "Now, hold on, Sterling. We don't need to be grabbing children. Do your duty, Sheriff," Sterling snapped. The room was suffocating. The walls seemed to be closing in. Clara looked around at the faces of her neighbors. Some looked away in shame, others watched with hungry eyes. She was alone. She was going to lose everything. The land was dirt. But Eli was her soul. "Pa!" The scream tore through the room, high and desperate. Eli was not looking at the sheriff. He was looking at the front door. Every head turned. The door stood open. Framed against the blinding white light of the street stood a figure. It was Noah. He looked like a specter rising from the dust. His buckskins were torn. His face smeared with ash and war paint, 2 black stripes across his cheekbones. He held no weapon in his hands, but his presence was sharper than any knife. He had not run. He had led the hunters away, circled back through the canyons, and walked straight into the lion's den. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was the silence of people remembering their nightmares. "Pa!" Eli screamed again. Breaking from Clara's grip, he ran toward the door. "Eli, stop!" Clara shouted. Noah stepped into the room. He did not look at the judge. He did not look at the guns that were suddenly being drawn. He looked only at the boy running toward him. "Stay back, little hawk," Noah commanded. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of stone. Eli stopped 10 feet away, trembling. Well, Vance snarled, stepping forward and drawing his heavy revolver. "The rabbit came back to the trap." Sheriff Brady drew his gun too, leveling it at Noah. "Stand down. Son, don't make me kill you in front of the boy." "I am not here to fight," Noah said calmly. He raised his empty hands. "I am here to speak for my son. You have no voice here. Savage!" Sterling spat, though he had retreated behind the heavy oak table. "Arrest him. He is a murderer and a thief. He is a father." Clara's voice cracked like a whip. She moved. Instinct took over. The same instinct that had made her raise a rifle 4 days ago. But this time, she did not aim at Noah. She stood in front of him. She placed her body directly between the barrel of Vance's gun and Noah's chest. "Mrs. Miller, move aside," Vance warned, thumbing back the hammer of his Colt. "No," Clara said. She glared at the bounty hunter, then at the judge, then at the town. "You look at him. You look at him and tell me he is a monster. He saved the Henderson family from the flood. He fixed my fences. He risked his life to lead these killers away from my house last night, and now he walks into a room full of guns because his son called for him." "His son?" Sterling laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "It is a convenient lie. The boy is a stray." "Show them," Clara said to Noah. Without turning around, Noah lowered one hand slowly and reached into his pouch. Vance tensed, his finger whitening on the trigger. Slowly, Brady barked. Noah pulled out the piece of silver. He held it up. The jagged edge caught the light. Clara reached into her pocket. She pulled out her own piece, the one she had carried for 4 years, the one she had found in Eli's fist. She held it up next to Noah's. Her hand was shaking, but she forced the 2 pieces together. Click. It was a soft sound, but in the hush of the room, it sounded like a thunderclap. The 2 halves fit perfectly. The jagged tear vanished, leaving a seamless circular medallion of a soaring hawk. "It is 1 piece," Clara announced. "It was broken the day he lost his family, the day the slavers took him." A gasp went through the room. "Slavers?" Judge Halloway leaned forward, adjusting his spectacles. "What is this?" "I saw them." The voice came from the back of the room. It was old Mr. McGregor, the proprietor of the trading post. He stood up, leaning heavily on his cane. He was a man who spoke little, which made his words weigh more. 4 years ago," McGregor said, his voice raspy. "A group of riders came through, rough men, not soldiers. They had a wagon full of cargo, hides, mostly. But I saw a boy, a little Indian boy, tied to the wagon rail. He had a mark on his wrist." McGregor pointed a gnarled finger at Eli. "Like a rope burn. I asked about him. They said he was stocking the mines in Mexico. I did nothing. I was afraid. But I saw them." The room shifted. The narrative of the savage kidnapping a white child dissolved, replaced by the ugly, uncomfortable truth of what the frontier actually cost. Noah looked at McGregor and dipped his head in a slow nod of acknowledgement. This man, Noah said, gesturing to himself, is not a ghost. I am a father who has walked the earth to find the piece of his heart that was stolen. He looked at the judge. I do not know your laws, but I know the law of blood. The boy is mine. Judge Holloway looked at the silver medallion, then at the sheriff, then at Sterling. He looked troubled. This complicates matters, Holloway muttered. It complicates nothing. Sterling slammed his hand on the table. The law does not recognize Indian testimony, and it certainly does not recognize sentimental jewelry. The man is a wanted fugitive with a price on his head. The woman is bankrupt. The law is the law. He pointed a shaking finger at Vance. Take him, and if the woman interferes, arrest her for aiding and abetting. Vance grinned. With pleasure. He stepped forward, the gun barrel inches from Clara's face. Move, widow, or get hurt. Clara did not move. She stared down the barrel. Shoot me, then shoot a mother in front of her son. Is that what the railroad pays you for? Don't tempt me, Vance whispered. Stop. Noah's voice was gentle. He reached out and placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. He gently moved her aside. Do not die for me, Clara, he said softly. You are the shield he needs. I am just the arrow. He stepped forward, offering his wrists to the sheriff. He looked at Eli. The boy was sobbing silently, his chest heaving. Little Hawk, Noah said, do not cry. You are strong. You have a mother who fights like a bear. You live. That is good. That is enough. He looked at Brady. Tie me, but do not let the boy see the iron. Brady holstered his gun. He looked sickened. He pulled a length of rope from his belt. Turn around, son. Sterling smiled. It was the smile of a man who had won the game. Excellent. Now, about the deed to the property. The universe, however, had a different verdict. Outside, the wind had been building, howling like a banshee. The window beside the judge, rattled loose by the gale, suddenly burst inward with a crash of shattering glass. A gust of wind, violent and sudden, swept through the room. It caught the stack of papers on the judge's desk, legal briefs, land surveys, tax notices, and sent them whirling into the air like a flock of white birds. It also caught the oil lamp sitting on the edge of the mercantile counter. The lamp tipped over. It smashed onto the floor, which was strewn with dry straw and sawdust for sweeping. The oil ignited instantly. Whoosh! A wall of fire erupted between the crowd and the door. Fire! Someone screamed. Panic, instant and primal, took the room. The crowd surged backward, away from the door, pushing toward the back wall where there was no exit. Men shouted, women screamed, and the horses outside, smelling the smoke, began to kick and tear at the hitching rails. Eli, Clara lunged for the boy, grabbing him just as the crowd threatened to trample him. Vance, caught off guard by the explosion of flame, stumbled back, dropping his gun. The back door, McGregor shouted. Through the storeroom. The room was filled with black, acrid smoke. The dry timber of the walls caught fire with terrifying speed. It was a tinderbox. Noah! Clara screamed, coughing. Noah was already moving. He was not running for the exit. He was running toward the fire. Judge Holloway had fallen in the crush, trapped behind the heavy oak table as the flames licked at his robes. Sterling was scrambling over him, using the old man as a stepping stone to save himself. Noah dove through the smoke. He grabbed Sterling by the collar and hurled him aside like a sack of flour. He reached down and hauled the judge to his feet, shielding the old man's face with his own body as a burning beam from the ceiling sagged dangerously low. Go! Noah roared, shoving the judge toward the sheriff. Clara, holding Eli tight, was pushed toward the storeroom by the crushing crowd. As she passed the overturned table where Sterling had been sitting, her foot snagged on a leather satchel that had spilled its contents. She looked down. Amidst the chaos, amidst the smoke and the screaming, a single document caught her eye. It was a map, a survey map of the valley. It showed the rail line, but it did not show the line passing near her property. It showed the line going through it, and stamped in red ink across her plot of land was the word acquired, and beneath it, A letter, half out of an envelope. She saw the date. It was dated 3 months ago. Payment approved for the acquisition of Miller Claim. Bounty for removal of nuisance occupants authorized. Nuisance occupants. That meant her. That meant Eli. Clara snatched the papers up, crumpling them into her bodice. "Ma, the roof!" Eli screamed. Clara looked up. The ceiling was groaning. "Out, everyone, out!" Sheriff Brady was bellowing, herding people through the narrow back door into the alley. Clara pushed Eli through the door into the cool, dusty air of the alley. She turned back. Noah was the last one inside. He was beating out the flames on the judge's coat with his bare hands. The front of the building collapsed inward with a roar, sending a geyser of sparks into the sky. Noah. He staggered out of the smoke, coughing, his eyes streaming. He was singed, his shirt smoking, but he was alive. He dragged the judge out with him, dumping the gasping magistrate onto the dirt of the alley. The townspeople stood in the street, watching the mercantile burn. The bucket brigade was already forming, but the building was lost. The wind whipped the flames high, a beacon of destruction. Sterling stood near the water trough, dusting soot off his suit. He was shaken, but his arrogance was intact. "You!" Sterling pointed a trembling finger at Noah, who was kneeling on the ground, retching smoke from his lungs. "You started this. I saw him." He kicked the lamp. "Arrest him for arson and attempted murder." Vance, who had managed to retrieve his gun, stepped forward, looking for an excuse to end it. "Liar!" Clara stepped forward. She looked furious. Her dress was torn, her face blackened with soot, but she held the crumpled papers in her hand like a sword. "He saved the judge!" Clara shouted. "And you are the thief!" She threw the papers at Sheriff Brady. "Read it, Sheriff," Clara commanded. "Read it out loud." Brady caught the papers. He looked at Sterling, then at the documents. He adjusted his glasses, squinting in the light of the fire. "This is a bill of sale," Brady said slowly. "Dated October. The Miller land was sold to the Union Pacific Railroad by the Territory Bank." He looked up, his face hardening. "But the foreclosure notice was only sent this week. You sold land you didn't own yet. Sterling!" "And the other paper," Clara said, her voice shaking with rage. "The bounty!" Brady flipped the page. "Authorization for payment to Mr. Vance for the removal of squatters and the neutralization of the Comanche threat to asset value." The crowd went silent. The fire roared behind them, but the heat coming from the sheriff was colder. "Neutralization," Brady repeated. "That means killing." He looked at Sterling. "You hired a killer to murder a woman and a child so you could pocket the difference on a land deal." Sterling's face went pale. It is standard business practice. The railroad needs the right of way. The Indian was a threat. The Indian just pulled me out of a fire while you were stepping on my head," Judge Holloway rasped from the ground. He coughed, wiping soot from his mouth. "Sheriff, arrest Mr. Sterling. And Mr. Vance." Vance did not wait to be arrested. He raised his gun, aiming not at the sheriff, but at Noah. If he was going down, he was taking his $50 with him. Bang! The shot echoed through the alley. Noah did not fall. Vance dropped his gun, clutching his right shoulder. He stared in shock at the woman standing 10 feet away. Clara Miller stood there. The smoking pistol, the one she had kept hidden in her pocket for 5 days, held steady in her hand. She had not hesitated. She had not flinched. "I told you," Clara said, her voice eerily calm. "The boy is not a trophy, and neither is his father." Sheriff Brady stepped forward and kicked the gun away from Vance's feet. He grabbed the bounty hunter by the collar. 2 other men from the town grabbed Sterling, their faces grim. The mood had shifted entirely. The fire had burned away the lies. Noah slowly got to his feet. He looked at Clara. He looked at the gun in her hand. And then he looked at Eli, who ran to him and buried his face in Noah's sooty buckskins. Noah wrapped his arms around the boy. He looked over Eli's head at Clara. There were no words. There was only the smell of smoke, the sound of the dying fire, and the realization that the world had turned upside down. "Ma," Eli sobbed. "You shot him." "I did," Clara said. She lowered the gun, her hand finally beginning to tremble. I surely did. She looked at Noah. His eyes were soft, filled with a gratitude that went deeper than language. The fire crackled, sending sparks drifting up toward the gray sky. They looked like fireflies, or like souls being set free. Clara took a breath. The air tasted of ash, but for the first time in 4 years, it also tasted of freedom. Let's go home, she said. The smell of wet ash hung over the town for 3 days. It was a thick, cloying scent that coated the back of the throat, a reminder of the fire that had consumed the mercantile and nearly taken the judge with it. But in the aftermath of the blaze, something else had been consumed: the silence. The town of Red River was no longer whispering behind hands. They were talking. They were talking about the land agent, Mr. Sterling, who had been dragged away in irons by the sheriff for fraud and conspiracy. They were talking about the bounty hunter, Vance, who lay in the doctor's back room with a bullet hole in his shoulder, waiting for the circuit marshal to come and collect him. But mostly, they were talking about the widow and the Comanche. On Sunday morning, 4 days after the fire, the church bell rang. It did not ring for a sermon. It rang to call the town to order. The mercantile was gone. So the meeting was held in the only building large enough to hold the questions that needed answering: the white-clapboard church with the peeling paint. Clara walked into the sanctuary holding Eli's hand. Her grip was loose, no longer the terrified clutch of a woman expecting theft. She wore her blue dress, washed and mended where the soot had stained it. Eli wore his Sunday best, his hair slicked down with water, though a stubborn cowlick stood up at the back. Noah did not walk in with them. He waited by the door, standing in the shadow of the vestibule. He wore a clean shirt that Clara had given him one of her late husbands, taken from the trunk. It was tight across his broad shoulders, but it made him look less like a spirit of the plains and more like a man trying to fit into a world of squares and angles. The church was full. Judge Holloway sat at the front, near the altar. His face was bandaged where the fire had singed him, and he leaned heavily on a cane. Sheriff Brady stood beside him, looking tired but resolute. "We are not here for a trial," Judge Holloway announced, his voice raspy from smoke inhalation. "The legal matters regarding the fraud are settled. Mr. Sterling's claims to the Miller land were based on a lie. The deed remains with Clara Miller." A murmur of approval went through the room. "We are here," the judge continued, looking toward the back of the room, "to settle the matter of the boy and the peace of this town." He gestured to Noah. "Step forward. Son." Noah walked down the aisle. He moved with a silent grace that the heavy boots could not disguise. He stopped before the altar, standing tall, his hands clasped behind his back. He did not look defiant. He looked patient. "The law of the territory is clear on custody," Holloway said. "Usually. But the law did not pull me out of a burning building. You did." Holloway adjusted his spectacles. "However, the town is divided. There are those who say a child raised in the Christian faith cannot be given to a nomad. And there are those who say blood is the only law that matters. I say he stays." The voice came from the third pew. It was Mrs. Henderson. She stood up, holding her baby, the child Noah had carried across the floodwaters. "That man," she pointed a trembling finger at Noah, "came into the water when the rest of you were watching from the bank. He tied my baby to his chest. He has gentle hands. If he says he is the boy's father, I believe him. A bad man does not risk his life for a stranger's child." "I agree," came a rumble from the back. It was the blacksmith, a man who rarely spoke. "He fixed the widow's roof before the storm. I saw the work. It was good work, honest work." One by one, they stood up. The baker who had sold Clara flour, the school teacher who had seen Eli tracing letters in the dirt. It was a court of conscience, and the verdict was shifting. They were no longer looking at a Comanche. They were looking at a neighbor who had paid his dues in sweat and courage. "Clara," the judge said, "what do you say?" Clara stood up. She walked to the front and stood beside Noah. She did not look at the judge. She looked at the congregation. "I have raised Eli for 4 years, she began, her voice steady. "I taught him to read. I fed him when there was no meat. I sat up with him when the fever took him. I love him as if I birthed him." She paused, taking a breath. "But I have learned that love is not about ownership. It is about truth. And the truth is, his name is Little Hawk. The truth is, he has a father who crossed the desert to find him." She looked down at Eli, who was sitting in the front pew, his feet barely touching the floor. "Eli, come here." The boy walked up to them. He looked small between the two adults, the woman in the calico dress and the man with the copper skin. "Tell them," Clara said softly. "Tell them what you want." Eli looked at the crowd. He was 8 years old, but his eyes held the wisdom of a child who had survived 2 worlds. "I remember the smoke," Eli said, his voice high and clear. "I remember being scared, and I remember Ma finding me. She smells like soap and wood smoke. She is my home," he turned to Noah. "But I remember you too. I remember the smell of sage. I remember the word for up. You are the part of me that was missing." He looked at the judge. "I do not want to choose. I want both." The simplicity of it hung in the air. "I want both." It was a child's demand, ignoring the complexities of race, law, and history. It was pure. "I do not wish to take him away." Noah spoke for the first time. His voice was deep, resonating in the quiet church. "I have no home to take him to. My people are scattered. The buffalo are gone. To take him to the reservation now, it would be a hard life, a hungry life." Noah looked at Clara. "He is fed here. He is safe. I only ask for the right to be known. I ask for the right to teach him the old ways, so he does not forget who he is. I will not steal him in the night. I will stay near. I will work. But I must be his father." The judge rubbed his chin. "And where would you stay?" "Noah, you cannot live in a barn forever. He can stay at the old trading post," a voice rasped. Everyone turned. Standing near the door was an old woman. Her skin was like crumpled parchment, and her hair was 2 long braids of silver. It was Morningstar, a Cree woman who had married a trapper 40 years ago and outlived him by 20. She was the unofficial grandmother of the territory, a woman who knew the uses of every herb and the history of every family. She walked forward, leaning on a willow stick. "The law is paper," Morningstar said, tapping her stick on the floorboards. "Paper burns. We saw that on Wednesday. But blood does not burn, and care does not burn." She looked at the judge. "You ask for a precedent, I give you the precedent of the winter of '64, when the fever came, and the white doctor was dead. Who delivered the babies, I did. Who sat with the dying, I did. We are all mixed up here. Judge, there are no straight lines in this country." She turned to Noah. "The trading post needs a man who knows the languages. Old McGregor is too blind to sort the pelts. You work there. You sleep there. It is 2 miles from the widow's cabin. Close enough to be a father. Far enough to be proper." Sheriff Brady nodded slowly. "That sounds like sense. McGregor has been complaining about his knees for a year." Judge Holloway picked up a piece of paper and a pen. "Very well. I cannot grant custody to a man without citizenship. However," he wrote quickly, the scratch of the pen loud in the silence, "I am issuing a writ of sponsorship." Holloway said, "This document states that Noah, surname unknown." "Parker," Noah said suddenly. "Noah Parker. It was the name of the man who taught me English." "Noah Parker," the judge corrected, writing it down, "is under the sponsorship of the township of Red River. He is employed by the McGregor Post. He has the right of visitation with the minor child, Eli Miller, subject to the approval of the guardian, Clara Miller." The judge looked up, his eyes stern. "This paper protects you from the bounty hunters. Noah, it says you belong here, but it is a 2-way street. You keep the peace. You carry no weapon in town limits, and if you run with the boy, the sheriff will ride you down. Do we have an accord?" Noah nodded solemnly. "We have an accord." The judge handed the paper to Noah. Noah took it as if it were made of glass. It was just a piece of paper, but it was also a shield. It was the first time the law had ever given him anything but a threat. Court is adjourned, Holloway said, bringing his cane down like a gavel. The ride back to the cabin was quiet, but it was a peaceful silence. The wind had finally died down to a gentle breeze that rustled the new green shoots of grass pushing up through the melting snow. When they arrived, the sun was beginning to set, casting long, golden shadows across the yard. The cabin stood sturdy and safe, but the front door still bore the scars of the night the hunters had come. The wood was splintered near the lock, and it hung crookedly on its hinges. "I will fix the door," Noah said as he dismounted. "You do not have to," Clara said. "You have a job at the post office starting tomorrow. You should rest." "A father secures the home," Noah said simply. He went to the barn and returned with the toolbox. Clara watched him for a moment, then went inside to start the fire. Eli ran off to the creek to check his fishing lines, his heart light, knowing that he did not have to say goodbye to anyone today. Clara moved around the small kitchen, making coffee. Through the window, she watched Noah working. He had taken his shirt off to keep it clean. The late afternoon sun highlighted the muscles of his back and the fresh bandage on his arm where a falling timber had burned him during the fire. She felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the stove. It was a feeling of safety. For 4 years, she had been the only wall between Eli and the world. Now, the wall was thicker. She poured 2 cups of coffee and walked out onto the porch. Noah was planning the edge of the door, shaving off thin curls of wood that smelled of pine and resin. He stopped when he saw her. "It will hold," he said, running a hand over the wood. "I reinforced the hinges with iron from the old wagon wheel." "Thank you," Clara said, handing him the cup. He took it, his fingers brushing hers. This time, neither of them pulled away. "Your arm," Clara said, looking at the bandage. "It needs fresh salve." "It is nothing," Noah said. "I have had worse." "Sit," Clara commanded gently. Noah sat on the edge of the porch. Clara went inside and returned with her medical tin. She sat beside him, unwrapping the linen. The burn was angry and red, but it was healing. She applied the cool salve, her fingers moving with practiced tenderness. Noah watched her face. He watched the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the way a loose strand of hair fell over her eyes. "You saved my life, Clara," he said softly. "In the courtroom." "You stood in front of the gun." "You saved mine," Clara replied, not looking up from his arm. "And the judge's, and Eli's. I have been running for a long time," Noah said. "I forgot what it was like to stop." "You can stop now," Clara said. She tied off the bandage and looked at him. They sat there in the fading light, the steam rising from their coffee cups. They were 2 people from different worlds, brought together by a tragedy and a miracle. They had both lost their spouses. They had both known the hollow ache of loneliness. Noah reached out and touched Clara's cheek. His hand was rough, calloused by years of war and survival. But his touch was impossibly light. "I do not know how to be a man in this world," Noah admitted. "The world of papers and judges and fences." "You learn," Clara whispered. "Just like I learned to survive the winters, one day at a time." He leaned in, and she met him halfway. It was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss of the root cellar. This was a slow, deliberate coming together. It was a kiss of gratitude, of shared relief, and of a tentative, fragile hope. He smelled of pine shavings and wood smoke. She smelled of lavender and resilience. They pulled apart slowly. Noah rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he said. "The trading post. McGregor will be waiting." "Stay for supper," Clara said. "Eli caught 3 trout. There is enough." Noah smiled, and for the first time, the sadness in his eyes receded, replaced by a glint of genuine happiness. "I would like that." The weeks that followed were a slow, steady rebuilding. The spring turned into summer, bringing heat and wildflowers to the plains. The town of Red River slowly adjusted to the new reality. Noah Parker became a familiar sight at the trading post. He was quiet, efficient, and possessed a knowledge of horses that made him invaluable to the ranchers. He did not drink, he did not gamble, and he walked with a dignity that discouraged insults. People still watched him. Of course, prejudice did not vanish overnight, but when Mrs. Henderson brought him a pie every Sunday, and when the sheriff tipped his hat to him on the street, the edge of the hatred dulled. Clara kept the farm running, but she was no longer doing it alone. Every few days, she would find the woodpile restacked, or the fence line repaired, or a fresh deer hung in the smokehouse. She never saw him do it, but she knew. And Eli blossomed. He spent his days between the cabin and the trading post. Noah taught him to ride without a saddle, gripping the horse's flanks with his legs. He taught him to read the clouds and to find water in the dry creek beds. He told him stories of the Comanche people, of the days when the buffalo covered the earth like a moving black carpet. But he also made sure Eli went to school. He made sure Eli listened to Clara. "Your mother teaches you to live in the world that is," Noah told the boy one afternoon as they sat by the river. "I teach you to remember the world that was. You need both to be a whole man." The legal threat from the bank dissolved. With Sterling in prison, the fraudulent land grab was revealed. The railroad eventually came, but the track was laid 5 miles to the north, sparing Clara's valley. One evening in late August, Clara sat on the porch, mending a shirt. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of violet and gold. Eli was playing in the yard. He was digging a hole near the corner of the cabin. "What are you doing, Eli?" Clara called out. "Planting," Eli said. Noah rode up on the mare. He had ridden over from the post for supper. He dismounted and walked over to the boy. "What are you planting, little hawk?" Noah asked. "A tree," Eli said. He held up a small sapling, its roots wrapped in burlap. "Mr. McGregor gave it to me. It is a cottonwood." "Cottonwoods need water," Noah said. "Lots of water." "I will water it every day," Eli promised. "I want it to grow big. I want the roots to go deep." "Why?" Clara asked, putting down her sewing. Eli looked at the cabin, then at Noah, then at Clara. "So the wind cannot blow us away," he said. "If the roots are deep, we stay." Noah looked at Clara. His eyes were dark and warm. He knelt down beside the boy. "That is a good reason," Noah said. "Let me help you dig." Clara watched them, the man and the boy, shoulder to shoulder, digging into the hard Texas earth. They were planting a future. She stood up and walked into the cabin. She went to the wooden box on the mantelpiece. She opened it and took out the silver medallion. It was soldered together now, the seam visible but strong. She rubbed her thumb over the hawk. It was no longer a symbol of something lost. It was a symbol of something found. She walked back out to the porch. Noah had finished planting the tree. He was packing the dirt down with his hands. He looked up at her and smiled. It was a smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "Supper is ready," Clara said. "We are coming," Noah said. He stood up and brushed the dirt from his hands. He put a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Come, son. Your mother is calling." They walked toward the porch, the three of them bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. The wind blew across the prairie, rustling the leaves of the new sapling. It was a gentle wind, no longer carrying the threat of winter or the smell of burning. It was just the wind, moving through the grass, singing a song of endurance. Clara opened the door, the one Noah had fixed, and held it wide. "Welcome home," she said. And as they stepped across the threshold, the door closed behind them, shutting out the night, and shutting in the warmth of a family that had been forged in the fire and cooled in the river, strong enough to last a lifetime. The weeks turned into months, and the months bled into the golden mist of autumn. The year became 1883, and the Texas Panhandle began to change its colors from the violent green of storm season to the deep, rusted ochre of the dry months. But for the cabin that sat on the rise above the creek, the change was not one of dying, but of settling. The arrangement was unorthodox, a puzzle piece that did not quite fit the square expectations of the territory, but it held. It held because it was forged in fire. Eli lived with Clara. That was the bedrock truth. He slept in the loft, he did his chores in the coop, and he sat at the table for lessons in arithmetic and scripture, but 3 days a week. When the sun hit the high meridian, he would sling his satchel over his shoulder and walk the 2 miles to the McGregor trading post. Noah did not live in the cabin. The town was tolerant, but it had its limits. Noah was a man who understood the value of patience. He had built a small structure near the river, halfway between the post and Clara's land. It was not quite a house, but it was more than a camp. It was a place of tanned hides and drying herbs, a place where the wind sang through the gaps in the willow branch walls. It was here that Eli learned the other half of his soul. On a crisp Tuesday afternoon, Clara stood on her porch, watching them. Noah and Eli were in the lower pasture. Noah was on foot, moving with a slow, deliberate gait. Eli mimicked him, stepping exactly where Noah stepped. They were tracking a coyote that had been pestering the chickens. "Look at the grass," Noah said, his voice carrying on the breeze. "How does it bend?" "It bends back," Eli said, "away from the path." "Good," Noah nodded. "And the silence? What does the silence tell you?" "That he is watching us," Eli replied. Noah placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. It was a touch of immense pride, light and guiding. He did not try to scour the white world from the boy. He did not tell Eli to forget the books or the Bible. He simply added layers to the foundation Clara had built. He taught Eli that a man could read a page, but he must also be able to read the sky. Clara smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. She turned back to the cabin. "It looks different now." With the help of the blacksmith and a few neighbors who paid their debts in labor rather than coin, they had added a lean-to on the west side. It was a proper room, meant for storage and for heavy work during the winter. The roof was tight, the shingles fresh. Clara was not a wealthy woman. The bank still held the note, and the harvest had been lean due to the early floods. But the fear of foreclosure was gone. The community, shamed by the revelations of the fire and Sterling's fraud, had quietly circled the wagons around her. When the tax collector came in September, it was Dr. Reynolds and the blacksmith who stood on the porch with her, ensuring the assessment was fair. She was not rich, but she was rooted. That evening, the air turned cold, hinting at the frost to come. Noah stayed for supper, as he often did now. The meal was simple venison stew and cornbread, but the atmosphere in the cabin was rich. "Mr. McGregor says the railroad will reach the crossing by spring," Noah said, tearing a piece of bread. "They are hiring scouts to map the grade." "Will you take the job?" Clara asked. Noah shook his head. "It would mean weeks away. I'm done with wandering. Besides, McGregor needs me. He forgets where he puts his spectacles 5 times a day." Eli giggled. It was a bright, unburdened sound that had been missing from the house for too long. "I planted the tree," Eli announced suddenly. "The cottonwood?" Noah asked. "Yes, by the creek, where the ground is wet. Ma said it is a good spot." Eli looked at Noah, his dark eyes serious. "I dug the hole deep, up to my elbows, so the roots go down to the water." "That is the way," Noah agreed. "So the wind cannot snatch me away," Eli recited, looking at Clara. "Like you said." "Ma?" Clara felt a lump in her throat. She reached across the table and covered Eli's hand with hers. "The wind can blow all it wants. Eli, you are not going anywhere." After supper, Eli climbed into the loft. He was asleep before the dishes were dried. Clara and Noah stepped out onto the porch. The night was vast and filled with stars. The Milky Way a smear of diamond dust across the black velvet sky. The wind rustled the dry cornstalks in the garden. Noah leaned against the railing, looking out toward the dark line of the river where his small shelter stood. He wore a heavy wool coat now, one Clara had patched for him. "He is happy," Noah said quietly. "He does not wake up screaming anymore." "He feels safe," Clara said. "Because he knows you are not a ghost. He knows where to find you." "I worry," Noah admitted. "When he grows older, the world is changing. Clara, the iron horse comes. Fences are going up everywhere. There will be less room for a boy who is both and neither." "Then we make room," Clara said fiercely. We push back the fences. We make him strong enough to walk through them." Noah turned to look at her. In the moonlight, the sharp angles of his face were softened. He looked less like the warrior who had stood in the burning courtroom and more like a man who had finally found a place to rest his burden. "You have done much for him," Noah said. "You gave him a name, you gave him a life, and you gave him back to me." "I did not give him back," Clara corrected gently. "I just opened the door." Noah moved closer. The space between them was charged, filled with the memory of the night in the root cellar and the quiet intimacy of the months that had followed. It was a slow burn, not a wildfire. It was the heat of coals that would last through the night. He reached out and took her hand. His thumb traced the rough skin of her knuckles. "The winter is coming," Noah said. "The nights will be hard in the willow hut." "They will be cold," Clara agreed, her breath hitching slightly. "I have been thinking," Noah said. He looked at the cabin, then at the new room they had built. "A man cannot protect his family from across the river, not when the snow drifts high." Clara's heart beat a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. She looked at him, searching his eyes for hesitation. She found none. "Are you asking for shelter? Noah Parker?" she asked softly. "No," Noah said. He stepped closer, until the warmth of his body protected her from the wind. "I am not asking for a roof. I have lived under the sky all my life. I am asking for a home." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I did not come here to take," he whispered against her skin. "I came to stay." Clara looked at him. She thought of her husband, buried on the hill. She thought of the years of loneliness, the nights she had barred the door against the world. She thought of the fear that had almost consumed her when she saw the red horsehair on the fence. All of that was the past. This man, with his scarred shoulder and his gentle hands, was the present. "If you stay," Clara said, her voice steady and sure, "you do not stay as a guest, and you do not stay as a guard." "How do I stay?" Noah asked. "You stay as a part of this house." Clara said, "You learn to belong. You learn that the fire needs wood every night, and the floor creaks in the corner, and that I need someone who will not leave when the storm breaks." "I am finished with leaving," Noah promised. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was not a stolen moment in the dark. It was a kiss given in the open, under the vast Texas sky. It was deep and quiet, a seal on a covenant that required no judge and no paper. It was a kiss that tasted of belonging. They stood there for a long time, listening to the wind. Far in the distance, to the east, there was a faint, low sound, a whistle, the railroad. It was miles away, but it was coming. It brought steel and steam and a new century. It brought laws that would try to draw lines between them, and people who would try to tell them who they could be. Clara pulled back slightly and looked toward the horizon. "Do you hear it?" she asked. "I hear it," Noah said. He put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her against his side. "It is the sound of time." "Are you afraid?" Clara asked. Noah looked at the cabin, where the yellow light of the lantern glowed in the window. Inside, Eli was sleeping, dreaming of hawks and arithmetic, safe in a house held up by 2 pillars instead of 1. "No," Noah said. "Let it come. We are here. We have roots." Clara rested her head on his shoulder. The wind blew across the dry grass, rattling the seed pods of the cottonwood tree. It was a cold wind, carrying the scent of snow. But Clara did not shiver. Family, she realized, was not defined by bloodlines or marriage certificates. Family was not about who you were born to. The family was simply the people who refused to walk away when the winter came. And as the first flake of snow drifted down from the obsidian sky, landing on the porch rail, Clara Miller knew that for the first time in a very long time, she was ready for the winter. They turned together and walked back inside, closing the door firmly against the night. The latch clicked shut, not to keep the world out, but to hold the warmth in. Thank you so much for listening to this story of the American West. I hope Clara, Noah, and Eli found a place in your heart today. Please, I would love to hear from you. Comment below and tell me where you are listening from. It is amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this tale of survival and love, please subscribe to my channel, Wild West Tales. Hit that like button and give the video a hype so we can share this journey with even more listeners. Until next time, keep your roots deep and your powder dry.